Hi everyone, thanks for watching another video. If you want to keep up to date with me, please hit the follow button here on my YouTube page. I'm going to be putting out a lot more content about real estate in Denver, the Denver Metro, and about Colorado. Some of it's going to be fun, some of it's going to be more informational like this, all right? I'm Colin Whitenack, a real estate agent in Denver with Colin and Company, powered by Keller Williams. All right, and today we're going to be talking about earnest money, okay? This is going to be a great video for first-time home buyers. It's also going to be a great refresh for anybody who's been through the process before. All right, let's get started. What is earnest money? Earnest money is simply a monetary deposit that a buyer makes to show the seller when they go under contract that they're really serious about getting to close, okay? How much is earnest money? Okay, in the state of Colorado, what I usually see is about 1%. So if you're buying a $500,000 house, I usually see it at about $5,000. However, that's negotiable. Could be more, could be less. All right. Where does the earnest money go? All right. Does the seller get to put it in their bank account and hold on to it till close? Usually not. If it's a seller carry situation where they might, carry the note for the buyer, that might happen, but usually no, okay? Usually the earnest money is a check, cashier's check, or a wire transfer that gets held by a third party, a neutral third party. Usually it's a title company. Sometimes it is the listing agent's brokerage though, okay? And there are rules surrounding those accounts. They can't use it to pay their bills because usually the money that's in there belongs to other people, all right? Okay, so when the deal eventually closes, all of that money gets credited back to the buyer, and it's just part of their down payment. But what happens if the deal doesn't close? Because sometimes that happens. Does the seller get to keep it? It depends. So there's a lot of contingencies and dates and deadlines built into our Colorado contract that does protect the earnest money from the buyer so they can go through all the steps, the inspection, disclosures, appraisals, reviewing HOA documents if that's the case. So they can make sure that it's the property that they want. And as long as they remain within those dates and deadlines that we're going to talk about here in a minute, they get to keep their, and then they cancel a contract, that earnest money will just simply get returned to them. All right. However, if they breach the contract, if they miss these dates and deadlines, if they get right to closing date and get cold feet, the seller might have a right to that earnest money. Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about some of those protections and some of those dates and deadlines that are in the Colorado contract that will protect the buyer. The first deadlines are the disclosure deadlines, and usually those are inside of a week. I like to actually keep them short to 1 or 2 days. This is the opportunity for the seller to send over like a property disclosure, if it's an older home, a lead-based paint disclosure so the buyer can review. Again, as long as you're within this time period, the buyer can cancel the contract and get their earnest money back. The next ones are property deadlines. That does encompass those disclosure deadlines, but they get to make sure that they can get insurance that they like within about 7 to 10 days. If not, they can cancel the contract, get their earnest money back. Due diligence, what does that encompass? That encompasses anything that's not outright in the contract. It might be a lease if this is an investment property. It could be, I like to put in there, signed permits if a lot of work was done, like maybe a pop top, and then invoices and warranties for any of the work or items within the home. Inspection deadlines are the ones that people are most focused on. These are really important to the buyer. And let me tell you about these. So the inspection objection deadline is usually about 7 to 10 days out. And by that date, the buyer can object to anything in the property, whether it's a health and safety condition or something like that. Say, hey, seller, I still want to buy your house, but I want you to fix these few items. And by the resolution deadline, the seller has to respond and say, okay, you've asked for these items. Here's what I'm willing to do. All parties have to agree. There's also a termination deadline. And by that deadline, if it's just too much for the buyer, or if they just don't like anything, it really doesn't have to be limited to anything big, the buyer can terminate the contract and get their earnest money back. This is a very loose period. It's a very easy period for a buyer to use to cancel a contract if they just decided there's anything they're not uncomfortable with. Down the bottom, you can see I have dates are always negotiable, and that's true. These deadlines can be as far out or as close in as a buyer and seller agree to. So just make sure your agent understands these dates and can negotiate the right dates for you. Okay. Also, this runs concurrent with that inspection period, but the title deadlines. Typically, the seller engages a title company, sometimes a buyer will, but usually they have about a week to start gathering the title information, about ownership of the home, where it is, if there's any liens on it, any easements, things like that. The seller also has an opportunity there to disclose anything that might have to do with that might not be on record. And the buyer can object if there's too much on there or stuff that they're uncomfortable with and get their earnest money back. Okay. Association documents typically happen within those time periods. Also, this is for any property, condo, townhouse, house that has an HOA, because these HOAs do come with rules. There's financial statements and everything like that a buyer needs to be able to review. Typically, as a seller has about a week to deliver that to the buyer, and the buyer usually has, anywhere from 3 to 7 more days to review those. And then usually there's no objection period where they say, we want you to change something. It's kind of a take it or leave it scenario where you need to be happy with the way the HOA is being run, the financials, all those kinds of things. Again, earnest money is protected during that timeline. Survey, I don't see this a lot within residential, suburban, urban areas. I see this mostly for ranches. But as surveys, you're going to use it for a couple different things to measure out the easements, to see where the property boundaries are, things like that. Typically, that's about 2 to 3 weeks out. Again, I don't see it very often, but every buyer has the right to request one and make it part of the contract if they want. Appraisal deadline. This is for any buyer who is getting a loan. Their lender is typically going to want an appraisal. But a buyer can also request this even if they're buying in cash to make sure a third party agrees with the price that they're purchasing at, so they can review that. Now, by these deadlines, which are usually about 3 weeks out, if that appraisal comes back and it's below purchase price, it can launch another round of negotiations with the seller. There's a couple different options that they can go through there. Or the buyer can cancel the contract and get their earnest money back as long as they're within those timelines, okay? Now, assuming a 30-day close, we're pretty deep into the deal here, so the buyer is pretty well protected. And finally, the loan deadline is called a loan termination or a loan conditions deadline. This is typically 3 weeks out, anywhere from like a week to 5 days before close. And by this date, the buyer, in their sole subjective discretion is the way the contract reads, if they don't like any part of their loan, they can cancel a contract and get their earnest money back. Now, their loan has been in process from day one, or at least it should have been, so they should know their interest rate, their approximate down payment, things like that. But I guess if there's a change in their credit or something, this still protects them right up until just before close. All right, boy, there sure are a lot of dates and deadlines and contingencies that protect the buyer's earnest money. All right, this is great for buyers. It can be a little frustrating for sellers if they get pretty deep in the deal and the deal cancels. All right, don't forget, all of these things are negotiable. Not only is the amount of money negotiable, the dates that it gets turned in are negotiable. The dates of those contingencies are negotiable. Sometimes you can negotiate in that part of the earnest money goes hard or not refundable to the buyer, either right away or at a certain step during the deal. There's a lot of options, all right? If you're confused about those, make sure you talk to your agent about them. If you have any questions about this video, please let me know. I'm easily reachable at 303-912-5394 or at colin@colinco.com, all right? Thanks for watching. Enjoy this beautiful late summer weather that we're having. As always, if you want to be a reading partner, go to readingpartners.org, find Colorado or the area that you live in, and maybe you can help tutor a young boy or a young girl catch up on their literacy so they have a better shot in this world. All right, thanks again, and I hope to see you soon.